The rain hammered the streets like punishment. Elena watched it through the bookstore window, counting drops the way she'd counted David's breaths in the hospital before they stopped. 43 minutes since the car should have arrived. Her phone had died hours ago, battery drained from searching the same questions that never yielded answers. Brake line corrosion, mechanical failure, no evidence of tampering, case closed. The black sedan pulled up wrong. Wrong side, wrong angle, wrong everything. She opened the door anyway. The smell hit first. Copper. That specific metallic sweetness she'd last encountered in the ICU when they'd finally let her see David's body. The man in the back seat turned his head with the careful economy of someone rationing energy for more important things than sudden movements. His face was pale in a way that had nothing to do with genetics. The suit he wore probably cost more than her annual salary. Italian wool, charcoal gray, tailored so precisely it looked weaponized. Even bleeding, he wore it like armor. His watch caught the streetlight. Patek Philippe Nautilus, white face, blue hands, platinum band, reference 5711/1P, retail value $58,000, the kind of timepiece that signaled not just wealth, but generational power, old money compressed into 40 millimeters of Swiss precision. Their eyes met. She should have screamed. She said instead, flat, observational, like she was noting the weather. "You're not my driver." "No." His voice was steady, despite the blood seeping between his fingers. "And you just became a witness." Outside, shadows separated from shadows. 3 men moving with the coordinated patience of people who knew their target couldn't run. One checked his weapon with casual efficiency, the distinctive profile of a Glock 19, 9mm, 15-round capacity, standard issue for professionals who valued reliability over flash. They hadn't seen her get in, not yet. 30 seconds, maybe less. The man reached inside his jacket with his free hand. She didn't flinch. That should have told her something about herself, should have warned her. He pulled out a phone instead of a gun, held it toward her. The screen was cracked but glowing. "Make a choice," he said. "Walk away or save my life. 5 seconds." She looked at the approaching figures, looked at the blood spreading across expensive fabric, looked at his eyes, dark and calm, and somehow more terrifying than if they'd held rage. Something moved through her chest, not fear, not compassion, something older that she'd thought she'd buried with David 6 months ago, when the police said mechanical failure, and she'd known they were lying.
The forensics hadn't made sense. Brake fluid doesn't just vanish from corrosion. The line had been clean cut, precise, then artificially abraded to simulate wear. Someone had used a rotary tool with a wire brush attachment to create surface damage consistent with years of road salt exposure. But the metallurgy told a different story. Fresh metal stress patterns inconsistent with gradual corrosion. The police either hadn't noticed or hadn't cared to notice. "Move over," she said, reaching for the driver's seat. "I'm driving." He studied her for one more second, prey recognizing predator, recognizing prey, then shifted with a grunt of pain he swallowed before it could become sound. She was already adjusting mirrors, already calculating angles and escape routes like muscle memory she didn't remember building. The engine purred, expensive, powerful, responsive. Mercedes-Benz S-Class AMG, 600-plus horsepower, bulletproof glass, run-flat tires, a fortress disguised as executive transport. Outside, one of the men noticed the movement, started running. She accelerated into rain and darkness. Behind them, gunfire cracked. Neither flinched.
In this city, the truth is rarely clean. If you've seen enough to know you're staying for the fallout, make it official. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I feel every nudge. Don't forget to check in with your location below and leave your feedback on the case. Your feedback is the only thing that keeps the record straight. Now, let's return to the story. The first bullet spiderwebbed the rear window, but didn't penetrate. Ballistic-rated glass, level B6 minimum, capable of stopping repeated 9mm rounds. She took the corner without touching the brake, let physics do the work, then accelerated hard through the apex. The tires found grip that shouldn't exist on wet asphalt. Michelin Pilot Sport Performance Compound. Everything about this vehicle was designed for exactly this scenario. "Left at the light," he said. No panic. The tone of someone ordering coffee. She took the left, threaded between a delivery truck and a taxi with inches to spare. Behind them, metal screamed against metal. Someone shouted in Korean, angry words in professional tones. Soldiers executing a mission that just got complicated. "How long have you been planning to kill me?" she asked. He made a sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been soaked in pain. "I'm not the one planning to kill you." "Then who is?" "Right now, the same people trying to kill me. In about 3 minutes, when they realize you just cost them their target, you become priority one." He shifted, pressed harder against his wound. The knife had entered between the 5th and 6th rib, angled upward, calculated to cause pain and bleeding without immediate fatality. Someone who knew anatomy, someone who wanted him to suffer. "They're very thorough. They'll find your name, your address, everyone you've ever cared about, under an hour." She took another turn, this time onto a service road behind warehouses. No streetlights, no cameras, the kind of place where bad things happened and nobody reported them until morning. She'd grown up in neighborhoods like this, knew how to disappear into places that swallowed people. "Who are you?" she asked. "Someone who's going to owe you his life." He said it like a threat. The rain eased. She killed the wipers. In the sudden quiet, she could hear his breathing, controlled but shallow. Respiratory rate approximately 28 breaths per minute. Normal was 12 to 16. Punctured lung probably, maybe tension pneumothorax developing. She'd sat in enough emergency rooms with David to recognize the sound of someone running out of time. "Hospital's 4 miles from here," she said. "There's a grave 4 miles from here if you take me to a hospital. They own 3 nurses and 2 doctors in every ER within 20 miles. I show up there, I'm dead before the paperwork's done. They'll inject air into my IV line. Textbook embolism. Medical examiner won't even look twice." She processed that, adjusted. "Then where?" "Keep driving. I'll know when we're safe." "You mean if we're safe?" "I mean when." He leaned his head back, strong jaw, precise cheekbones, the kind of face that belonged in boardrooms or political campaigns. Handsome in a way that felt weaponized. But his eyes never stopped moving, assessing, calculating, processing threat matrices faster than most people could process fear. "You drive like you've done this before," he said. "I haven't." "You're lying." She was, but not about what he thought. She'd never escaped a hit squad, but someone had made her practice J-turns and evasive maneuvers in empty parking lots at 3 in the morning. Someone who'd insisted it was just for fun, just in case, just to be safe. Someone who'd been paranoid until paranoia became justified. Someone who died 6 months ago in a car that exploded for reasons the police called mechanical failure, despite evidence they declined to investigate. The brake master cylinder showed tool marks, microscopic scratches from a precision instrument, probably a surgical scalpel or similar blade, used to weaken the brake line at its most vulnerable point.
Not enough to cause immediate failure, but enough that the first hard application of pressure would rupture it completely. Timed perfectly for the sharp curve on Harper's Ridge where David drove home every night, where brake failure meant a 200-foot drop into a ravine, where the resulting fire would destroy most evidence of tampering. She glanced at the rear view. No headlights yet, but they'd regroup. She needed to stop being predictable. "What's your name?" he asked. She almost told the truth. Almost. Some instinct stopped her. Elena, her mother's name. Close enough to feel comfortable, far enough to buy time. "I'm Jin." Then waited with something she couldn't identify. "Don't trust me, Elena. I'm not worth trusting." The honesty should have been reassuring. Instead, it felt like the first move in a longer game. She drove for another 20 minutes, taking random turns, doubling back, clearing their trail. Jin gave directions that made no sense until suddenly they did. A parking garage beneath a building that looked abandoned but wasn't. She pulled into a spot on the 3rd sublevel, killed the engine. Darkness so complete it felt solid. "Medical kit under your seat. I need you to check the wound." She found it. Professional grade, military surplus, IFAC configuration. Quick clot combat gauze, high fin chest seals, NAR combat application tourniquet, Israeli emergency bandage, nasopharyngeal airway kit. This wasn't a first aid kit. This was battlefield trauma equipment. Her hands moved through the contents with uncomfortable familiarity. David had kept the same kit in their car, had made her learn every item, had drilled her on hemorrhage control and tension pneumothorax treatment until her hands moved automatically. She thought he was being paranoid. "I'm not a doctor. Just tell me if you see bone."
She moved to the back seat. He unbuttoned his shirt with one hand. The wound was a gash across his left ribs, deep but clean. Knife entry, approximately 4 centimeters long, depth estimated at 6 to 8 centimeters. Blade type, smooth-edged, likely a tactical fixed-blade knife, maybe a bench-made Nimravis or similar. Someone had gotten close enough to stab him and skilled enough to miss vital organs by millimeters. That wasn't assassination. That was message. "No bone," she said, applying pressure with gauze that soaked through immediately. Blood type appeared O positive based on color and consistency. "But you need real stitches." "Surgical threads in the kit. You're doing it." You've watched enough medical dramas. Small stitches, close together. Don't think too much." She found the suture kit. 3/0 silk with curved needle. She threaded it with hands steadier than they should have been. David's voice echoed in her memory. Approximation of wound edges, minimal tension, even spacing. The first stitch made her stomach turn. The second was easier. By the 5th, she'd found rhythm. Interrupted sutures, 5 millimeters apart. Jin didn't make a sound, just watched her work with that same calculating assessment. "You didn't ask why they want me dead," he said. "Would you tell the truth?" "No." "Then why waste the question?" She tied off another stitch. "Men like you always have reasons to be killed." "Men like me?" "Custom suits, Swiss watches, cars that cost more than houses, enemies organized enough for coordinated hits." She met his eyes. "Did I miss anything?" A smile touched his mouth, there and gone. "You're smarter than you pretend." "I'm exactly as smart as I pretend. You're just used to people pretending to be less intelligent around you." "Why aren't you?" "Because I'm not trying to get anything from you. I'm trying to survive the next 6 hours." She finished the last stitch. Her hands were covered in his blood, already drying, turning dark. She'd need to burn these clothes.
polyester cotton blend would incinerate completely at approximately 800 degrees Celsius. Any commercial incinerator or sustained open flame would work. DNA evidence would be destroyed. The thought came automatically, which should have disturbed her more than it did. "Bathrooms through that door," Jin said. "Soap, clean clothes, everything you need." "How did you know I'd think about burning my clothes?" "Because you think like someone who understands evidence, chain of custody, DNA transfer, trace analysis." He buttoned his shirt over fresh bandages. "That means you've either done this before or you've thought about doing this before. Either way, you're not what you appear to be." She finished bloody gauze, stood. "Neither are you." "I'm exactly what I appear to be. That's what makes me dangerous."
The bathroom was cleaner than it had any right to be. White tile, fluorescent lighting, water pressure that suggested maintained plumbing, professional cleaning service. Someone paid to keep this place operational. Someone with money for ghost facilities throughout the city, ready for emergencies exactly like this. She washed his blood from her hands, evidence disappearing. Her reflection stared back. Same face, same dark eyes, but something had shifted behind them, some door opening that she'd spent 6 months trying to keep locked. The clothes on the shelf were women's clothes, ranging from extra small to large. Dark sweaters, neutral colors designed to avoid attention, like this place was designed for rotating cast members. She changed into black jeans and a dark sweater, both of which fit well enough to be unsettling. Someone had anticipated her dimensions, or they kept enough variety to cover most possibilities. She wasn't sure which was worse. When she emerged, Jin was on his phone. He ended the call as she approached, but not before she caught a fragment of Korean. The tone was authoritative, commands. He'd shifted from wounded victim to operational commander in the time it took her to change clothes. "Dr. Tak will be here in 30 minutes, he said. Dr. Tak, fondly called Doctor by Jin. Dr. Tak makes house calls to parking garages? Dr. Tak makes house calls to wherever I need her. She's very well compensated for flexibility. 200,000 annually plus operational bonuses, enough to ensure loyalty or at least ensure silence." Elena sat on a concrete pillar, distance between them. Now that immediate crisis had passed, absurdity crystallized. She'd gotten into a stranger's car, fled a hit squad, performed emergency medicine, and was now waiting in an underground bunker for a doctor who made illegal house calls. 6 months ago, her biggest concern was whether to refinance the mortgage, interest rates, property values, normal people problems. "You can leave," Jin said. "Tak will bring cash, 50,000, enough to disappear. Get out of the city, start over somewhere they won't look. New identity costs about 12,000 if you know the right people. That leaves 38,000 for establishing yourself. First and last month's rent, security deposit, enough time to find work under a new name." "That's a lot for a stranger who accidentally saved your life." "It's not payment, it's survival insurance, for both of us." He shifted, winced despite himself. "The people who came after me won't stop. They'll analyze everything, find witnesses, camera footage, maybe someone who saw you get in the car, facial recognition software, license plate readers, traffic cameras at major intersections. Once they identify you, they'll leverage you to get to me. 50,000 buys you time to become invisible. Or it buys your peace of mind that I won't talk. That too."
The honesty felt like a weapon, like he was using truth because lies were too obvious, or because he'd calculated that honesty would be more disarming than deception. "What if I already know who sent them?" she asked. Something flickered behind his eyes. Interest or concern, maybe both. "Do you? You said they're organized, professional. That suggests structure, infrastructure, operations that don't happen without significant resources. She kept her voice neutral, academic. In this city, there are maybe 3 organizations capable of that coordination: Yakuza, Russian Bratva, Korean organized crime networks. You're clearly connected to one, which means someone inside is trying to remove you. You've thought about this a lot. I've had 25 minutes. Most people would spend 25 minutes panicking. I did that in the first 2 minutes. It wasn't productive. She met his gaze. You're right, aren't you? This is internal. Jin was quiet. When he spoke, his voice had changed, softer, more genuine, like he'd decided something about her that shifted the conversation's parameters. Her name is Angela, he said. Angela Kim. I found out 3 hours ago she's been feeding information to a rival organization for 6 months. Client lists, security protocols, financial routing numbers, everything someone would need to systematically dismantle what we'd built. I confronted her. She called in a team. I got out, but not cleanly. He touched his ribs, hence the knife. Why a knife instead of a bullet? Because she wanted me to suffer. Bullets are efficient, 9 millimeters to the brainstem, death in seconds. Knives are personal. Knives are intimate. Knives say, I want to watch you bleed. Elena processed that. A woman, betrayal, personal hatred disguised as business. The psychology was different from what she'd expected. She was your lover. She was my partner, business and everything else. 3 years. Until she wasn't. Until I discovered she'd been stealing from our operations. Not money, at least not primarily. Information, client lists, routes, protection details. Everything someone would need to systematically dismantle what we'd built. His jaw tightened. I trusted her completely, made her exempt from verification protocols, let her operate without oversight. That was the mistake. Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. Client lists, routes, protection details. David worked in logistics. David had access to route optimization systems. David knew things he wasn't supposed to know. David died 6 months ago in an accident that wasn't an accident. What kind of operations? She asked carefully. Jin studied her, really studied her, like he was deciding whether to trust her with truth or comfortable lies. The kind where logistics become complicated, where shipping manifests don't match actual cargo, where routes get optimized for reasons that have nothing to do with efficiency and everything to do with avoiding customs inspection points. My husband worked in logistics, she said, then wished she hadn't. But it was too late. The words hung in the air between them like confession.
The silence stretched, like wire pulling taut. Jin's expression didn't change, but his stillness became absolute. Predator stillness. The kind that meant recalculation, threat assessment, probability analysis happening behind those dark eyes. Your husband. Dead 6 months. Brake line failure, road salt corrosion. These things happen sometimes. She heard herself reciting the official story with the flatness of someone who'd stopped believing it long ago. What company? Pacific Freight Solutions, mid-level management, route optimization and scheduling. Pacific Freight is a subsidiary of Hanso Logistics. Jin said it like he was tasting poison, testing it on his tongue. Your husband worked for a company in my business ecosystem. Hanso handles approximately 40% of our logistics operations, legitimate and otherwise. I didn't know that. Didn't you? He leaned forward despite his injury and suddenly looked very dangerous. Not injured, not vulnerable. Dangerous. You got into my car. You didn't panic when you saw blood.
You performed tactical driving you claim you've never done. You sutured a knife wound with muscle memory that suggests prior training. You think like someone with operational experience. And now I learn your dead husband worked for a logistics company connected to my organization. His eyes were dark and steady. That's not coincidence. That's pattern. Elena felt her carefully constructed walls developing fractures, hairline cracks spreading through concrete. I got into the wrong car. Did you? What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you've been looking for answers about your husband's death, looking for entry points into the world that killed him. And tonight, the universe handed you a bleeding man in an expensive suit in exactly the moment you were most vulnerable, most exposed, most likely to make an impulsive decision that wasn't impulsive at all. He tilted his head. That's not panic. That's strategy. The accuracy was unsettling, like he could see through skin into the machinery beneath. She'd spent 6 months in grief that had slowly crystallized into something sharper, something harder. She'd learned things about David she'd never wanted to know, had discovered capabilities in herself she'd never wanted to have, had started thinking in terms of leverage rather than morality, had become someone who calculated costs instead of feeling them. Even if that's true, she said carefully, what difference does it make now? It changes everything, because if you've been unconsciously positioning yourself for this moment, preparing, researching, planning without admitting you were planning, then you're more dangerous than either of us realized. He paused. And I need to decide whether you're an asset or a threat. Can't I be both? Most people can't, but you're not most people. He studied her. 6 months ago, Pacific Freight had a shipment intercepted. $3 million in bearer bonds disappeared between the port and delivery point. Someone changed the route at the last minute. Someone with access to scheduling systems. Someone who knew exactly how to make a truck vanish from GPS tracking for 47 minutes.
$3 million. The number hung in the air like smoke, like the answer to every question she'd been asking for 6 months. The bonds were being moved for a client, old money, European family liquidating assets, untraceable, negotiable, the kind of theft that doesn't get reported to police because the money itself is already questionable. Someone used your husband's credentials to reroute that truck. Whether he was a willing participant or an unwitting tool, I don't know. But his death happened exactly 2 weeks after that theft. 14 days. That's not coincidence. That's cleanup. The words hit like physical impact, like being in the car with David when the brakes failed, that moment of weightlessness before gravity took over. You're saying David stole from you? I'm saying someone used David's credentials to steal from me. But his death happened on schedule, professional schedule. 2 weeks is standard cooling off period, time for the heat to die down before eliminating witnesses. Jin's expression was unreadable. Angela must have used your husband to facilitate the theft, then eliminated him to tie up loose ends, which means you've been in danger this whole time. You just didn't know it. Why now? Why wait 6 months? Because you weren't worth the risk. A grieving widow with no apparent knowledge isn't a threat. Social media posts about missing him, posting old photos, normal grief behavior. But a grieving widow who starts asking questions, who digs through encrypted files, who demonstrates she's smarter than she pretends, that becomes a problem worth solving. Elena stood abruptly, needed to move, needed air that didn't taste like revelation, needed space to think without Jin watching her with those calculating eyes that saw too much. She pressed her palms against cold concrete. The last 6 months replayed with new context. Every strange car parked on her street, every hang-up call,
every time she'd felt watched, but dismissed it as paranoia born from grief. Every time she'd told herself she was imagining things. It hadn't been paranoia. It had been surveillance. It had been Angela's people assessing whether David's widow knew enough to be dangerous. So Angela's been watching me? Almost certainly, waiting to see if you knew anything, running facial recognition on your movements, checking your online activity, your purchases, your search history, looking for patterns that suggest you're more than you appear. Jin stood carefully, moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne beneath copper blood. Tom Ford oud wood, expensive, subtle, the kind of scent that cost $300 per bottle. Tonight changes everything. You didn't just accidentally save my life. You inserted yourself directly into the middle of a war you've been orbiting for 6 months. You made yourself visible. You made yourself relevant. You made yourself dangerous. I got in the wrong car. Did you? He said it gently, but it landed like accusation.
Like he knew. Like he could see the truth she hadn't admitted to herself. Your ride was 40 minutes late. That's unusual for a service you presumably use regularly. Your phone was dead. That's convenient. Creates plausible deniability. No GPS tracking, no electronic trail. You got into a car that was obviously wrong. Wrong side of the street, wrong angle, wrong everything. But you got in anyway. His gaze held hers. Most people would have hesitated, would have checked the plates, would have confirmed identity. You didn't. You just got in and started driving like you'd been waiting for exactly this opportunity. The accuracy made her chest tight, made it hard to breathe, because he was right. Some part of her had been waiting for something, waiting for the universe to hand her away into the world that killed David, waiting for permission to stop being a victim and become something else, something harder, something that could survive in places where normal people died. And when it appeared, a bleeding man in an expensive car with enemies pursuing him, she hadn't questioned it. She just acted, had driven like she knew what she was doing, had sutured wounds like she'd been trained, had calculated and assessed and survived like someone who'd been preparing for exactly this moment. Even if that's true, she said, the past doesn't change present circumstances. We're here. Angela wants us both dead. So what now? Now I decide whether you're an asset or a threat. Can't I be both? No. I'm someone who's built an empire on reading people correctly, on understanding motivation before it becomes action, on identifying threats before they become fatal. His expression hardened. And right now, I can't read you, can't tell if you're a widow seeking answers or something more calculated. That uncertainty is the most dangerous thing in my world. Maybe I don't know either, Elena said. It felt like the most honest thing she'd said all night, and realized she meant it, and realized that terrified her more than the gunfire, more than the blood, more than any of it. Because if she didn't know who she was, she couldn't predict what she'd do, couldn't control the person she was becoming, couldn't stop the transformation from victim into something else entirely.
Jin's phone vibrated, the sound sharp in the concrete silence. He checked it, and his expression shifted into something colder, professional. The vulnerability that had crept in during their conversation vanished like it had never existed, like switching off a light. Angela just made contact. She wants to meet, says she has information about who killed your husband. He showed her the screen. The message was brief, direct, economical with words the way professionals were. She's using you as bait. How does she even know I'm with you? Because she's very good at what she does. She probably had surveillance on possible safe locations, traffic cameras, license plate readers, pattern analysis software that tracked my movements over the past 6 months and identified all possible refuge points. He paused. Or someone told her. Ice in her veins, cold spreading from her chest outward. You think there's another leak?
Angela didn't execute tonight's operation alone. Hit squads don't just materialize. Someone inside provided real-time intelligence. Someone who knew my schedule, my route, my security protocols down to the minute. His jaw tightened, muscle flexing beneath skin. Someone still out there, still reporting, still feeding Angela information while pretending loyalty to me. Do you know who? I have 3 people I trust completely. Dr. Tok, she's been my personal physician for 9 years. Marcus Zhao, head of security, former Chinese Special Forces, with me for 12 years. James Park, my lawyer, handles all legal operations, 15 years. He met her eyes. One of them isn't who I think they are. He made 3 phone calls in rapid succession, each conversation brief, coded, designed to reveal nothing to listeners but convey specific instructions to recipients, military-style communication protocol. Elena watched him work, saw how quickly he shifted from wounded survivor to operational commander, saw the architecture of power beneath the injury. We're moving locations in 1 hour, different facility, different protocols. I've sent separate instructions to Tok, Marcus, and Park. Each has a different meeting point, different time, different cover story. Whoever shows up where Angela expects reveals themselves. That's clever. That's survival. Canary trap methodology. Feed each person slightly different information. See which version reaches your enemy. Traces the leak back to its source. He moved to a wall panel, pressed a sequence that revealed a hidden cabinet. 6-digit code, biometric scanner. Inside were weapons, documents, cash, stacks of hundreds bound with paper bands, everything needed for rapid disappearance. He handed her a burner phone, cheap, prepaid, untraceable. Memorize this number. If we get separated, call exactly once. Say, "The window is open," and hang up. I'll know where to find you. Where? Metropolitan Museum of Art, 2nd floor, Egyptian wing, Temple of Dendur, Tuesday and Thursday at 3 p.m., Saturday at 11 a.m. Those are the windows. If you don't appear during a window, I assume you are dead or compromised.
Elena took the phone, felt its weight. This was real operational security. This was how people lived when trust became tactical, when relationships were protocols instead of feelings. You've done this before. Built contingency plans for betrayal. Many times. 23 years in this business. You don't survive that long without assuming everyone will eventually betray you. The only question is when and why. He selected a handgun from the cabinet, checked the magazine. 15 rounds, 9mm, Glock 19 Gen 5, standard issue for reliability. He hosted it beneath his jacket. The trick is making betrayal more expensive than loyalty. Create incentive structures where staying loyal is the rational choice. Is that how you saw Angela? Cost-benefit analysis? No. That's why she was able to hurt me. Something raw flickered across his expression, there and gone, but real, genuine. I made her exempt from calculation, let emotion override strategy, believed love could exist outside the framework of power and self-interest, believed she was different from everyone else who'd ever gotten close to me. That was the mistake. Love isn't a mistake. In my world, it is, because love creates blind spots, creates vulnerabilities that enemies exploit, creates scenarios where you choose wrong because the right choice costs something you can't afford to lose. He looked at her directly. Your husband probably loved you. That's why he kept you separate from his real work, why he compartmentalized, built walls between his home life and his operational life. He was trying to protect you by keeping you ignorant, and it got him killed anyway. The words should have felt cruel. Instead, they felt true. David had been distant the last year of his life, had worked late, traveled frequently, developed patterns that suggested a second life running parallel to their marriage. She'd assumed an affair, had prepared herself for that revelation, had never imagined something more complicated, more dangerous, had never imagined he was trying to protect her from something worse than infidelity. If David was involved in your world, why didn't you know? If your organization is as sophisticated as you claim, how did someone use his credentials without you noticing? Because Angela is exceptional at creating blind spots. She knew I wouldn't audit her directly, knew I'd trust her operational decisions without question. She used that trust to build secondary systems I never examined, shadow accounts, parallel routing structures, entire networks operating beneath my awareness. He closed the weapons cabinet. She was stealing from me for at least 18 months before I found evidence. By then, she'd extracted nearly $10 million in assets, some currency, some information, some leverage that's worth more than money. Your husband was probably just one of many pawns she manipulated. Just a pawn. Pawns are crucial. They're the ones who actually execute strategy, while kings and queens position themselves safely behind them. They're the ones who die first when the game goes wrong.
His phone vibrated again. He checked it, frowned. The expression was subtle, but she'd learned to read him in the hours since they'd met, learned the micro-expressions that meant recalculation, threat escalation. Dr. Talk just arrived at location 3. That's not where I told her to go. Elena's pulse quickened, adrenaline flooding her system, fight or flight response activating. What did you tell her? Location 1, which means either she misunderstood my coded instructions, which is unlikely given her 9 years of experience with my communication protocols. He didn't finish, didn't need to. Or she's compromised. Or she's compromised. The words hung between them, and Elena realized they were out of time. Jin was already moving, gathering documents from hidden compartments, destroying anything that could provide intelligence to enemies. Elena helped without being asked, learned the pattern quickly. Burn financial records, photograph, then destroy photographs, wipe electronic devices with military-grade degaussing equipment. The paranoia felt rational now, necessary. Survival protocol for people who lived in worlds where information was ammunition. Talk's been with me 9 years, Jin said, feeding papers into a small incinerator. Acrid smoke filled the space, chemical smell of burning documents. She's treated injuries I couldn't explain to hospitals, gunshot wounds, knife lacerations, chemical burns, kept secrets that could destroy me. I paid for her daughter's education at Cornell, attended her son's wedding in San Francisco, gave her a house in Taipei worth $800,000 for retirement. And you'd kill her if she betrayed you? I'd kill anyone who betrayed me. That's not cruelty, that's clarity. That's understanding that in this world, betrayal is terminal. You either eliminate the threat or you become the victim. There's no middle ground, no forgiveness, no second chances, no believing people deserve redemption. That sounds exhausting. It's reality. Everyone else just pretends otherwise until reality arrives, until someone they trusted puts a knife between their ribs or feeds their schedule to an assassination team. Then they understand. But by then, it's too late. He finished destroying documents, checked his watch, the Patek Philippe still perfect despite everything, still keeping time with Swiss precision. 40mm case, 10-day power reserve, still functioning flawlessly, still marking seconds toward whatever came next. We have 40 minutes before the trap closes, before Angela's people converge on this location and the other two, before someone I trusted reveals themselves as something else entirely. What if it's not Talk? What if she just made a mistake? Then I apologize before killing her anyway, because in my position you can't afford to be wrong. The cost of misplaced mercy exceeds the cost of necessary cruelty. One mistake, one moment of weakness, one decision to believe in redemption instead of elimination. That's all it takes to die in this world. Elena understood then what Jin really was. Not a man who'd become ruthless through ambition, not someone corrupted by power.
A man who'd stayed alive by eliminating hesitation, by making impossible choices and living with them, by becoming the thing his enemies feared so much that betrayal carried fatal consequences, by accepting that morality was a luxury he couldn't afford.
She should have been horrified. Instead, she felt recognition, felt kinship, felt understanding. Because she was becoming the same thing. "You're going to use me as bait," she said. "Yes. And if Angela kills me, you'll consider it unacceptable collateral damage?" "No. If Angela kills you, I'll consider it unacceptable waste of a potentially valuable asset." He met her eyes. "I don't sacrifice pieces I can still use. That's bad strategy. Chess players who waste their pieces lose games, but I will risk pieces when potential gain exceeds potential loss, when the expected value calculation justifies the danger. Right now, you're worth the risk." "How flattering." "It's not meant to be. It's meant to be honest. I could lie, could tell you I care about your survival for moral reasons, but you're smart enough to know that would be bullshit. So I'm giving you truth instead. You're valuable, you're useful, you're worth keeping alive. That's more than most people can say." He handed her a weapon. Small caliber, easily concealed. Sig Sauer P365, 9mm, 10-round magazine, striker-fired, 3.1-inch barrel, designed for concealed carry, lightweight polymer frame. "Do you know how to use this?" he asked. She should have said no, should have maintained her cover as a widow who stumbled accidentally into danger, should have protected the fiction that she was innocent. Instead, she checked the chamber, verified the safety, adjusted her grip for the light frame, tested the trigger weight, approximately 5 pounds, acceptable. Muscle memory she shouldn't have possessed. Jin noticed. Of course he noticed. He noticed everything. "Where did you learn that?" "David taught me. Said every woman should know basic firearms safety. Took me to ranges, made me practice until I could field strip and reassemble in under 30 seconds, until I could put 10 rounds in a 6-inch circle at 15 yards. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth. David had trained her far more than basic safety, had made her practice until loading and firing became instinctive, until she could perform emergency reloads and failure drills without thinking, had insisted she understand not just mechanics, but tactics, angles of fire, cover versus concealment, how to assess threats and eliminate them efficiently. She thought it was paranoia, thought he was preparing for home invasions that would never come. Now she understood it had been preparation for this, for the moment when his death would require her to become someone capable of surviving his world. "Your husband was training you for something," Jin said. "I think he was training me to survive him." The observation hung between them, heavy, undeniable. David knew his work would eventually become fatal, knew his wife would need capabilities beyond suburban normalcy, had systematically equipped her with skills she'd need after he was gone, had turned her into a weapon while she thought they were just spending quality time together at the range. It was the most loving and most horrifying gift she'd ever received.
Jin's phone vibrated. This time, when he checked it, his expression went blank, completely neutral. The kind of neutral that meant something catastrophic had just been confirmed. The kind of neutral that came before violence. "What happened?" Elena asked. "Marcus just arrived at the correct location, alone, unarmed, following my instructions perfectly. Sent photo confirmation showing he's at the designated coordinates with no hostile contact." He showed her a photo. A man in his 40s, military bearing, standing exactly where specified. Chinese features, scar above his left eye. "Which means it's not Marcus."
Then who? Dr. Tuck or James Park. One of them is working with Angela. One of them has been compromised. One of them has been feeding her information while I paid them to be loyal. And we're about to find out which. He holstered his weapon, looked at Elena with an expression that might have been sympathy or might have been calculation, might have been both. Are you ready to meet the person who killed your husband? The question landed like a physical blow, because suddenly Elena realized something she should have recognized earlier. She wasn't sure she wanted the answer, wasn't sure what she'd do with the truth once she had it, wasn't sure if revenge would fill the hollow space David's death had carved into her chest, or if it would just make the emptiness permanent, would just prove that she'd become someone David wouldn't recognize, someone he might have feared. But she'd come too far to turn back now, had crossed too many lines to pretend she could return to being the person she was 6 months ago. Yes, she said, and meant it, and hated that she meant it, and wondered what that said about who she was becoming.
They drove separately, Jin in a replacement vehicle that appeared with the same mysterious efficiency as everything else in his operation. Elena following in the original sedan. Different routes, different timings, same destination. A restaurant in Koreatown that looked closed but wasn't. The kind of place where back rooms hosted meetings that never officially occurred, where cash changed hands and decisions were made and people sometimes disappeared. Elena parked 3 blocks away as instructed, walked the distance with her hand near the concealed weapon, the Sig Sauer pressed against her ribs, constant reminder, constant weight, hyper-aware of every shadow, every vehicle, every person who might be surveillance. She'd crossed into a world where paranoia was intelligence, where trusting surfaces meant dying surprised, where everyone was a potential threat until proven otherwise. The transformation from suburban widow to operational asset had taken less than 8 hours. That should have felt impossible. Instead, it felt inevitable, like she'd been preparing for this her entire life without knowing it. Jin was waiting inside, seated at a table with clear sight lines to all entrances, tactical positioning, back against the wall, escape routes identified and memorized. Marcus stood nearby, the man from the photo, radiating controlled violence, 6'2", 220 pounds, scar tissue on his knuckles suggesting years of hand-to-hand combat. He nodded to Elena but didn't speak. His eyes did the talking. You're being evaluated. Don't be a threat. Park should arrive in 12 minutes, Jin said. Tak hasn't responded to her last summons. Radio silence for 47 minutes. That tells us something. That she's realized you're testing her. Or that she's coordinating with Angela to turn this meeting into an ambush, running probability scenarios, planning optimal strike timing, assembling resources for a coordinated assault on this location. The 12 minutes felt eternal. Elena watched Jin check his phone repeatedly, watched Marcus scan the restaurant's perimeter with eyes that never stopped moving, watched herself become someone who found this normal, who calculated firing angles and exit strategies, who measured loyalty in operational compliance, who thought in terms of threat matrices instead of human relationships. David's widow was gone. Something harder had taken her place, something that didn't flinch at violence, something that understood necessity. James Park arrived 11 minutes after Jin's prediction. Mid-50s, expensive suit, Ermenegilid Zegna, probably $12,000. Lawyer's face trained in neutral expressions, professional mask that revealed nothing. He saw Jin and his relief appeared genuine, saw Elena and his confusion appeared authentic, micro-expressions consistent with surprise. "Who is this?" he asked.
Someone who became relevant tonight, Jin said. Sit down, James. Park sat. His hands were steady, his breathing controlled. Resting heart rate approximately 60 beats per minute. He didn't exhibit stress markers, no pupil dilation, no increased perspiration, no involuntary muscle tension. Either he was innocent or exceptionally skilled at deception.
In this world, those might be the same thing. I received your coded message, Park said. You indicated compromise in the organization. Have you identified the source? I've narrowed it to 2 possibilities, you or Dr. Tak. Park's expression didn't change. Tak has been with you longer, has deeper access to operational details, has more opportunities for intelligence gathering. The logical suspect would be her. Unless that's exactly what I'm meant to think. Unless the betrayer has been carefully positioning themselves as above suspicion while directing attention elsewhere. Classic misdirection. Make the obvious suspect so obvious that I don't examine the less obvious alternative. Jin leaned forward. Where were you between 6 and 8 p.m. tonight? At my office, reviewing contracts for the Seattle acquisition, $47 million real estate deal. Complex legal structure requiring detailed analysis. My assistant can verify my presence. Your assistant works for you, receives salary from accounts you control. Her verification is worthless. Then review security footage. Cameras in the lobby, cameras in the elevator bank, cameras on my floor. I didn't leave the building until 9:30 p.m. Electronic keycard logs will confirm entry and exit times. Jin nodded to Marcus, who made a call, spoke rapid Mandarin. Verification would take minutes. In the silence, Elena watched Park carefully, studied his micro-expressions, his body language, his breathing patterns. He showed appropriate concern, but not fear, appropriate confusion, but not guilt. He was either innocent or performing innocence so skillfully it achieved the same effect. Marcus returned, whispered in Jin's ear. Jin's jaw tightened, muscle flexing, tension building. Security footage confirms you were in your office during the relevant time frame. Electronic logs show your keycard accessing the building at 4:15 p.m. and exiting at 9:32 p.m. 5 hours and 17 minutes of continuous presence, which means it's Tak. But Elena had been watching Park's hands, had seen his thumb move across his phone screen in his pocket, subtle movement, easy to miss, had recognized the micro-expression of satisfaction when Marcus delivered his report, barely perceptible, quarter-second duration, had recognized the pattern because David had done the same thing, creating alibis through technology, being exactly where he claimed to be, while his true actions happened elsewhere through intermediaries, through cutouts, through people who executed orders while maintaining plausible deniability. He's lying, Elena said.
Everyone turned to her. Park's expression remained neutral, but his thumb stopped moving. Complete stillness. The kind of stillness that came from conscious control. The footage is real, Jin said. Marcus verified. The footage is real, but irrelevant. He was in his office, but he wasn't alone. He had someone with him, someone who carried out his instructions while he maintained his alibi. Someone who made the calls and sent the messages and coordinated with Angela while he sat in his office reviewing contracts and creating documentary evidence of innocence. She looked directly at Park. You've been using your assistant as more than administrative support. She's your operational proxy. She's been executing Angela's instructions while you remained visibly innocent. Classic compartmentalization. You stay clean while someone else gets their hands dirty. Park's neutral expression cracked. Just slightly. Just enough. A micro-expression of surprise, of recognition, of calculation about whether to maintain the lie or cut his losses. Marcus moved fast, had Park restrained before the lawyer could reach for whatever weapon he'd concealed. The struggle was brief, violent, efficient. When it ended,
Park was bleeding from his mouth where Marcus had struck him, and Elena's observation had been confirmed by the evidence Marcus extracted. Encrypted phone with AES 256 encryption, secondary accounts registered to shell corporations, communication logs showing coordination with Angela going back 18 months. 18 months. While he'd been pretending loyalty, while Jin had trusted him, while he attended meetings and provided counsel and smiled and planned betrayal. "How did you know?" Jin asked Elena. "Because my husband did the same thing, used me as his alibi while his real work happened elsewhere, while he coordinated shipments and changed routes and facilitated thefts. I was his cover, his plausible deniability, the normal wife who thought her husband worked normal hours doing normal things." The admission landed in silence, heavy, undeniable. She'd just revealed more than she'd intended, had just told Jin that David hadn't just worked in logistics, that David had been operational, that David had been a player, not a victim, that she'd been complicit, whether knowingly or unknowingly, that everything she'd believed about her marriage might have been performance. Jin's expression shifted. Understanding, reassessment, calculation, something else she couldn't identify. Maybe respect, maybe suspicion, maybe both. "Your husband wasn't a victim. He was a player, an active participant in the theft. He rerouted that truck deliberately, knew exactly what he was doing, used you as cover while he operated." "I don't know what he was," Elena said, and realized she meant it, and realized that terrified her more than anything else tonight. Because if David had been using her, if their marriage had been operational cover, if everything she'd believed about him was fiction, then who was she? What was she? What had she become?
The aftermath was efficient. Park disappeared into a vehicle with Marcus. Questions would be asked in places designed for questioning. Answers would be extracted with tools designed for extraction. Pliers and blowtorches and pharmaceutical compounds that made people tell truths they'd die to protect. Elena didn't ask about the process, didn't want to know specifics that would make her complicit in whatever came next, didn't want to cross that final line between observer and participant, though she suspected she'd already crossed it hours ago. Jin drove her back to the parking garage where this had started. Dawn was breaking, turning rain-slicked streets silver, the city waking, normal people beginning normal days, going to normal jobs, living normal lives. They'd been running for 8 hours. It felt like 8 years, felt like a lifetime compressed into single night. Angela will know by morning that Park is compromised. She'll have backup communication protocols, dead drops, prearranged signals. When Park misses his next scheduled contact, she'll know he's captured. She'll accelerate her timeline, come after me directly instead of through intermediaries. And me? You've proven useful, more than useful. You saw what I missed, identified the pattern that would have gotten me killed, demonstrated observational capabilities that suggest either training or natural aptitude for this kind of work. He handed her an envelope, thick with cash. She could feel the weight, could smell the paper. $50,000 for saving my life, another $50,000 for identifying my betrayer, another 100 because you're going to help me find Angela. Elena took the envelope, but didn't open it. $200,000, more than she'd earned in 3 years of work, more than she'd seen in one place since the insurance payout from David's death. Why would I do that? Because she killed your husband, because she's been watching you for 6 months, waiting to decide if you needed to die too, waiting to see if you'd become a problem, waiting to demonstrate knowledge or capability that made you a threat worth eliminating. He met her eyes. Because you want answers more than you want safety.
because you've been waiting for this chance since the night police officers told you about mechanical failure and you knew they were lying." He was right. All of it was right. Elena had been waiting for this, had been preparing without knowing what she was preparing for, had become someone capable of surviving in Jin's world, because surviving meant reaching the person who'd destroyed hers, meant finding Angela, meant getting truth, meant avenging David, even if she didn't know who David really was. But something else was true too, something she couldn't quite articulate, something about the way Jin looked at her, the way he trusted her observations over his own, the way he handed her $200,000 like it was an investment rather than payment, like he was buying something, like he expected returns.
He was recruiting her, not just for finding Angela, for something longer, something permanent. "I'll help you find Angela, but not for money." Then for what? For the truth about what David was really doing, for answers about who he was beneath the man I thought I married, for knowing whether our entire marriage was real or just another operational cover, whether he loved me or just used me, whether anything between us was genuine or if I was just his alibi for 8 years. Jin nodded slowly. "That's a fair price. Painful, but fair. The truth usually is." She opened the car door, stepped into gray morning light. Her clothes still smelled like his blood. Her hands still remembered the weight of a gun. Her mind still calculated angles and exits and trust as tactical resource. She'd become someone different in 8 hours, someone David might not recognize, someone she didn't recognize. "One more thing," Jin said before she could close the door. "Dr. Tak contacted me an hour ago. She's dead. Suicide, apparently. Left a note confessing to being Angela's source, admitted everything, asked for forgiveness." Elena stopped, hand on the door. "You don't believe it?" "No, I think Angela killed her to tie up loose ends, to make me believe the threat was contained while she prepared her real move. Tak would never commit suicide. She had family, had grandchildren, had reasons to live even if she'd betrayed me. This was cleanup." He smiled, and it was the most dangerous expression she'd seen yet. Predator smile, hunter smile, the smile of someone who'd just been given permission to stop pretending to be civilized. Which means the game isn't over, it's just beginning. Elena closed the car door, walked away. Behind her, Jin's engine disappeared into morning traffic. Above her, the sky held that gray uncertainty between night and day, that liminal space where anything could happen, where transformations occurred, where people stopped being who they were and became something else. She'd crossed into his world, had proven herself useful, dangerous, valuable, had found the path to Angela and the answers about David. But as she walked toward her car, she caught her reflection in a store window, saw a woman she barely recognized, saw someone who'd stopped being a victim and hadn't yet decided what to become instead, saw someone who'd saved a criminal's life and might have damned her own soul in the process, saw someone capable of violence, saw someone who'd calculated cost-benefit of human life, saw someone becoming exactly what David had been training her to become. She touched the envelope in her pocket. $200,000, the price of her husband's life and her own complicity. The price of crossing into a world where normal rules didn't apply, where morality was a luxury, where survival meant becoming something harder. She'd find Angela, would get her answers,
would discover what David had really been, what she was becoming, what price both of them had paid for entering a world where love was strategy and survival was success. But she wouldn't go home, not yet, because there was something Jin didn't know, something David had told her 3 days before he died, something he'd made her promise never to reveal unless he died in exactly the way he did.
She drove to the storage facility across town. 24-hour access. No security cameras in the individual units. Cash-only rental. The kind of place people used when they needed to hide things, when they needed secrets to stay secret. Unit 247. She'd rented it 3 months after David's death, after she'd found the encrypted files on his laptop, after she'd cracked his passwords using information only she would know, after she'd discovered he'd been living a second life she'd never suspected. The key had been exactly where he'd said it would be, in his mother's jewelry box, the one Elena had inherited when David's mother died 2 years ago, hidden in a false bottom beneath costume pearls and tarnished silver. She unlocked the unit. Inside were files David had stolen from Pacific Freight Solutions, documents he'd been analyzing, route manifests with discrepancies, shipping records that didn't match customs declarations, financial transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands and Singapore and Luxembourg, patterns he'd been mapping, evidence he'd been collecting, and something else, something that made her chest tighten. A photograph, David and Angela standing together in front of Pacific Freight Solutions headquarters, both smiling, both wearing wedding rings, not to each other, but the rings were identical, same design, same style, same everything. She looked closer, zoomed in on the engraving visible even in the photograph, enhanced the image on her phone, sharpened the contrast. The words came into focus. Until the end. Elena's hand went to her own ring, the one David had given her on their wedding day 8 years ago, the one she'd worn every day since, the one she hadn't been able to remove even after his death. She turned it, examined the engraving she'd memorized years ago, the words David had chosen, the promise he'd made. Always and forever. Different words, different promise, different meaning. She pulled out her phone, Googled Angela Kim's full name that Jin had mentioned, found a social media profile from 3 years ago before it had been deleted, cached images, digital footprints, evidence of a life lived before going underground. She scrolled through. There, Angela wearing a ring, left hand, 4th finger, the same ring, until the end. David and Angela had known each other, had worked together, had shared something that used identical symbols, had been connected in ways Jin didn't know, in ways Elena hadn't suspected, which meant everything Jin had told her might be true, or might be carefully constructed fiction, which meant David's death might have been Angela eliminating a partner, or might have been something else entirely, which meant Elena had just spent 8 hours with a man who might be her husband's killer, or might be the only person who could help her find the truth. She looked at the photograph again, really looked, at David's smile, at Angela's expression, at the way they stood, comfortable, familiar, like people who'd worked together for years, like partners, like co-conspirators, like people who shared secrets.
She thought about Jin's wound, a knife, not a bullet, personal, not professional. She thought about timing, David dead 6 months ago, February 14th, Angela betraying Jin now, August 15th, 6 months apart, exactly. She thought about patterns, about operational planning, about the possibility that she'd been manipulated from the moment she got into that car, that Jin had known exactly who she was, that the wrong car wasn't wrong at all, that she'd been the target all along, or the possibility that she'd been manipulating Jin from the moment she chose to drive, that some part of her had recognized him, had known exactly what she was doing, had executed a plan she hadn't consciously acknowledged.
Or maybe everyone was manipulating everyone else, and truth was just another tactical resource, another weapon, another tool in an endless war where nobody won and everybody lost, and survival was the only victory that mattered. Elena gathered the files, locked the storage unit, drove into morning traffic. She'd helped Jin find Angela, but not for the reasons he thought. And when she found the truth, whatever it was, she'd decide who deserved to die for David's death, would decide if revenge was justice or just another form of destruction, would decide who she was beneath the widow, beneath the operator, beneath all the masks she'd been wearing for 6 months without realizing they were masks. Because there was something else in the files, something she'd found 2 months ago but hadn't understood until tonight. A document, encrypted, hidden in layers of security that had taken her weeks to crack. A contract between David Chen and Angela Kim, dated 3 years ago, the same month David had proposed to Elena. The contract specified terms, conditions, deliverables, compensation structure. It specified a target, Jin Matsuda. It specified a timeline, 3 years of intelligence gathering, then extraction, then elimination. It specified payment, $5 million, split between David Chen and Angela Tim upon successful completion. The contract was signed by both of them, witnessed and notarized, legal and binding, which meant David hadn't been a victim. David had been a willing participant. David had been targeting Jin for 3 years. David had married Elena 1 month after signing this contract, which meant their entire marriage might have been operational cover, might have been part of the plan, might have been David's alibi while he infiltrated Jin's logistics network and gathered intelligence and prepared for extraction and elimination, which meant Elena had been used, had been manipulated, had been nothing but a prop in David's operation. Or maybe not. Maybe David loved her. Maybe the operation had been separate from their marriage. Maybe he tried to keep them apart and failed. Maybe he died trying to protect her. Or maybe that was just what she wanted to believe. Maybe that was just the comfortable lie she told herself because the truth was too painful. The sky lightened.
The city awoke, and Elena drove toward answers she wasn't sure she wanted, toward a confrontation she wasn't sure she'd survive, toward a truth that might destroy everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and the man she'd married. But now she knew something Jin didn't. Now she had leverage. Now she had power. Because if David and Angela were planning to kill Jin 3 years ago, and if David had died 6 months ago, and if Angela was moving against Jin now, then maybe the original plan was still in motion. Maybe David's death had been part of it. Maybe Angela had eliminated her partner to keep the entire $5 million. Or maybe Jin had discovered the plot. Maybe Jin had killed David. Maybe Jin had been hunting Angela for 6 months. Maybe Elena had been the bait all along. The pieces were moving. The game was accelerating, and Elena was standing in the middle of it all, with a gun in her pocket, $200,000 in cash, and a truth that could destroy everyone. The only question was, what would she do with it?
Elena sat in her car for 20 minutes, engine off, city waking around her, normal people starting normal days. She wasn't normal anymore. Hadn't been since the moment she'd gotten into Jin's car. Maybe hadn't been since the moment David died. Maybe hadn't been since the moment she'd married a man who'd been planning an assassination while proposing marriage. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. "You found the contract," Jin's voice, calm, unsurprised. Elena's blood went cold. "How did you—" "Because I put it there, in David's files, 3 months ago. Encrypted it exactly enough to be challenging, but not impossible. Waited to see if you'd find it.
waited to see what you'd do with it. A pause. You are predictable, Elena. Or should I call you by your real name, Sarah Chen? The world tilted. Sarah, her legal name, the one she'd stopped using when she'd started college, when she'd chosen to go by her middle name instead, Elena, the one David had called her, the one that had felt like reinvention. You've known who I was the entire time? Since before you got in my car, since before your husband died, since the moment David Chen submitted his employment application to Pacific Freight Solutions and listed his wife as Sarah Elena Chen, marketing coordinator, no security clearance required. Jin's voice was soft, almost gentle. I've been watching you for 8 months, watching to see if you knew about David's real work, watching to see if you were complicit or innocent, watching to see what you'd become after his death. You killed him! Not a question. No, Angela killed him. I just didn't stop her. Saw it coming, saw the brake line tampering, saw the planning, could have warned him, could have intervened, chose not to. A pause. Because David was planning to kill me, because the contract you found was real, because he and Angela had been coordinating for 3 years, because his marriage to you was operational cover to make him look stable, trustworthy, normal. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think. You're lying. Am I? Then why did David propose to you exactly 4 weeks after signing that contract? Why did he insist on a small wedding with no elaborate guest list? Why did he keep you separate from his work friends? Why did he train you in tactical driving and firearms and evidence disposal while telling you it was just hobby, just fun, just quality time together? Jin's voice was relentless, undeniable. He was preparing you, training you, turning you into someone who could survive his world, because he knew that if the operation went wrong, you'd be caught in the middle. You'd need capabilities beyond normal suburban existence. He loved me, she said it desperately, needed it to be true. Maybe he did. Maybe somewhere in the operation he fell in love with his own cover story. Maybe he started caring about you.
Maybe he tried to keep you safe. Maybe that's why Angela killed him, because he was becoming a liability, because he was letting emotion compromise operational security. A pause. Or maybe he was just very good at his job, good at making you believe, good at performance, good at being exactly what you needed him to be while planning to put a bullet in my head. Elena leaned her forehead against the steering wheel. Her hands were shaking. 8 hours ago, she'd been a widow seeking answers. Now she was a pawn in a game she didn't understand, a game that had been playing out for years while she'd been oblivious. "Why tell me this now?" she asked. "Because you're at a decision point, because you found the contract and now you have to choose what to do with that information, because Angela is still out there, still planning, still dangerous, still needs to be eliminated." Jin's voice hardened. "And because I'm offering you a choice. Help me find Angela. Help me finish this. Help me end the operation your husband started, and I'll give you the truth, all of it. Everything David was, everything he planned, everything he felt. I have his communications, his encrypted files, his real journals, everything you want to know about who he really was. And if I refuse, then you walk away, take your 200,000, disappear, start over somewhere else, live whatever life you can build, and you'll never know. You'll spend the rest of your life wondering if David loved you or used you, if your marriage was real or performance, if anything between you was genuine." A pause. "That's the cost of walking away. Permanent uncertainty, permanent doubt, permanent not knowing." It was a perfect trap, psychological manipulation, offering her the one thing she couldn't refuse, the truth about David, the truth about her marriage, the truth about whether she'd been loved or used. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. "Angela will contact you, probably today,
She knows you're with me now, knows you're valuable, knows you have information she needs. She'll offer you answers, offer you revenge, offer you partnership, offer you everything you think you want. Jen's voice was calm, calculated. When she does, you're gonna say yes. You're gonna meet her. You're gonna let her think she's recruited you. And then you're gonna tell me where and when. You want me to betray her. I want you to finish what your husband started. He was supposed to get close to Angela, supposed to gather intelligence, supposed to identify her weaknesses. He did all of that. Then he fell in love with her. Jen let that land, let it sink in. Yes, David was in love with Angela, not you. The contract was real. The partnership was real. The plan to kill me was real. And so was their affair. 3 years, the entire time he was married to you.
The words hit like bullets, like the car crash that killed David, like every moment of grief compressed into single devastating impact. You're lying. But she didn't believe it anymore. I have proof. Photos, communications, hotel records, flight manifests, everything you'd need to verify. Everything that proves David and Angela were lovers, were partners, were planning to take my organization and my life and split everything between them. 5 million was just the beginning. They were planning to take over my entire network, worth approximately 200 million annually. A pause. You were never part of the plan. You were just cover, just the normal wife who made David look stable while he operated. Elena couldn't speak, couldn't think, couldn't process. Everything she'd believed was fiction. Everything she'd known was lies. Everything she'd been was performance. So when Angela contacts you, you're going to remember that she killed the man you loved. You're going to remember that she took him from you. You're going to remember that she deserves to die, and you're going to help me make that happen. The line went dead. Elena sat in silence, trying to breathe, trying to think, trying to decide who she was, what she'd become. Her phone buzzed again. Different number. She answered. "Hello, Sarah," a woman's voice, warm, sympathetic. "We need to talk about your husband, Angela."
Elena met Angela in a coffee shop in Westwood. Public place. Crowded. Safe. The kind of location where violence was impossible, where conversations could happen without immediate threat, where two women could sit across from each other and lie about everything while pretending to be honest. Angela was beautiful. Mid-30s, Korean features, elegant, poised. The kind of woman who turned heads without trying. The kind of woman David would have fallen in love with. The kind of woman that made Elena feel ordinary by comparison. "I'm sorry about David," Angela said. Her eyes seemed genuine. Her sympathy seemed real. "He was a good man. He deserved better than what happened." "You killed him." Elena said it flatly. No emotion, just fact. Angela didn't deny it, didn't flinch. "Jin killed him. Jin discovered our operation, discovered that David was gathering intelligence, discovered that we were planning to move against Jin. Jin sabotaged David's car, made it look like accident, made you believe it was mechanical failure." She leaned forward. "Everything Jin has told you is a lie. Everything he's shown you is manipulated. Everything he wants you to believe is fiction, designed to turn you against me." "How do I know you're telling the truth?" "Because I have no reason to lie. Because I loved David. Because we were partners. Because we were planning a future together." Angela pulled out her phone, showed Elena a photo. David and Angela, embracing, kissing, clearly intimate, clearly in love. "And me?" she asked. "What was I?" Angela's expression softened. "You were what David needed you to be. The stable wife, the normal life, the cover that made him look trustworthy. But you were never the woman he loved. You were never his partner. You were just convenient. The word landed like a knife, like the knife that had stabbed Jin, like the brake line that had failed on David's car, like everything that had happened in the last 8 hours. Convenient. Not loved, not chosen, not real. Just convenient. "What do you want from me?" Elena asked. "I want you to help me kill Jin. I want you to help me finish what David started. I want you to help me avenge the man we both lost." Angela met her eyes. "And in return, I'll give you the truth, the real truth. Everything David felt, everything he planned, everything he was. No lies, no manipulation, just truth." The same offer Jin had made, the same promise, the same bait. Elena looked at Angela, looked at the woman who'd been David's lover.
Looked at the woman who'd killed him or been blamed for killing him. Looked at the woman who was offering partnership or manipulation, and realized she didn't know which was which, didn't know who was lying, didn't know who was telling truth, didn't know anything anymore, except that she'd become someone capable of sitting across from her husband's killer or her husband's lover and calculating whether to help or betray her. Someone capable of using grief as weapon. Someone capable of playing both sides. Someone capable of becoming exactly what this world required. Someone David had been training her to become. Someone she barely recognized. Someone she wasn't sure she wanted to be. But someone she couldn't stop being. "I'll help you," Elena said, and meant it, and didn't mean it, and wasn't sure which was true. "Good," Angela said. "We move against Jin in 48 hours. I'll send you details." They stood, shook hands, separated. Elena walked to her car, got in, sat in silence, pulled out both phones, Jin's number on one, Angela's number on the other. 2 calls she could make, 2 paths she could take, 2 futures she could choose. She thought about David, about whether he loved her, about whether anything had been real, about whether it mattered anymore. She thought about Jin, about whether he was hero or villain, about whether his honesty was truth or tactic, about whether she could trust him. She thought about Angela, about whether she'd killed David or loved him, about whether she was offering partnership or manipulation, about whether revenge would heal or destroy her. She thought about herself, about who she'd been, about who she was becoming, about whether she could stop the transformation or if it was already too late. The sun was fully up now, the city alive, normal people living normal lives. She wasn't normal anymore, would never be normal again, had crossed into a world where truth was weapon and love was weakness and survival meant becoming something harder than human. She made her choice, made her call, said the words that would determine everything, that would end some lives and save others, that would reveal truth or create more lies, that would make her hero or villain or something in between. And as the phone connected, as the voice answered, as the next phase began, Elena realized something. She'd stopped caring which side she was on, stopped caring about right or wrong, stopped caring about anything except finding the truth about David. And if that made her monster, so be it.
If that made her exactly like Jin and Angela, so be it. If that meant she'd lost her soul somewhere in the last 8 hours, so be it. She'd become what she needed to become, to survive, to find answers, to finish what David had started, whether he loved her or not.
Elena entered that car a grieving widow, but she emerged from the night as a cold-blooded operator. This collision with the Korean underworld has forced her into a chilling moral ambiguity. She now has to decide if she is actually seeking justice for her husband or if she has simply developed a taste for the power that killed him. The truth is rarely clean. If you're in for the long haul to see if Elena survives her own transformation, subscribe now so you don't miss the next reveal. I want to know who's listening. Tell me where you're watching from and give me your analysis of Elena's final choice in the comments. I'm reading every word.